some of you don't know this, but I'm an old Votech guy. They changed the name right after I left. I don't know if there was a connection or not, but Monroe also served time in Votech, actually dealing with prison industries and programs. So we're glad to have that commonality. Monroe is a product of the University of Tulsa in political science and economics. He's also got a master's degree from the University of Oklahoma, so he's bipartisan. And he's worked in a number of fields, all of which have prepared him well to be our mayor, in my opinion, in business, nonprofits, in higher education, and vocational education. And one of the great things about his campaign was he had a plan. But it's even greater that he's executing on that plan. Not everybody knows how to do that. So the Honorable Mayor Monroe Nichols.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you. Let's see, can you hear me pretty well? So I'm going to apologize in advance. I lost my voice yesterday, which in most cases, people get excited when politicians lose their voice. But it's been a little inconvenient for me the past couple of days, but it is a real pleasure to be here this morning. I figured if there's anywhere I can go with my voice going out, church is probably one of those places. And so with God's strength, maybe we'll overcome just a little bit of discomfort. So you may have to hear, listen very intently, which make this room different from just about any other room I'm ever in. But it is a real pleasure to be here. Thank you, Roy, for that. I know you all probably know Roy is an absolute legend in the career tech world. And so when I walked in and I met him, the first thing I told him was, I'm an old career tech guy too. Now, since he told you that they changed the name since he was there, he's a little bit older of a career tech guy than I am. But he is a legend in the tech in the career tech space. And Roy, for all you've done for the state of Oklahoma, just thank you very much. Absolutely. Well, as Roy said, we spent over a year campaigning, talking about ways in which we wanted to improve the city. Just about one of the things is a great sense of pride that I have is that most everybody knows what our administration is about at this point because of that, and we've stayed pretty true and consistent to that. We are about ending homelessness by 2030. We are about improving student outcomes by putting 15,000 more kids on a pathway to economic mobility in that same time frame. We are working right now, going back to the career tech days, to work on how we are balance out our economic expansion, particularly as we think about workforce development and making this the safest big city in the country, all while doing a better job of partnering with our tribal nations, of which Tulsa is the largest city in the country that is all Indian reservation. That seems like a lot, and it is. It is very much a lot. The one thing I will say about being here in this church today, it took me about 30 seconds to realize that this congregation is involved in so many of those same efforts. And so I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you for what all you've done. I told Roy, I said, it sounds like you guys have been in the business a little longer than I have here. And so I am very appreciative of that. So, when I got elected, when you think about how do you deliver on getting to functional zero homelessness by 2030, how do you deliver on getting 15,000 more kids on a pathway to economic mobility, how do you deliver on making this the safest big city in the country and co-governing with tribes, I think it starts with certainly a clear plan and clear ways of accountability. So as we talk about everything we're doing in the mayor's office, we talk about it in terms of things that are very much quantifiable. We talk about functional zero homelessness by 2030 because that is a data point by which we can tell if we're successful or not. And between now and 2030, we can tell if we're on the right track or not. We talk about affordable housing units. We don't just talk about, we want to do more of them. We talk very specifically about 6,000 affordable units in the next 4 years. So we can make sure we're on the track to doing what we know we have to do. When we talk about education, it's 15,000 kids on the pathway to economic mobility, like I mentioned. And you may say, well, Monroe, how do you know that kids are on a pathway to economic mobility? We judge it by those cradle to career outcomes, everything from kindergarten readiness to third grade reading to middle grade math and science to high school completion, post-secondary entry, post-secondary completion until they go to work. And when we see there's problems along that pipeline, the question you start to ask yourself is, why is that? Why is it that kids are having a difficult time when it comes to early literacy, for example. And I want to also, just really quickly, I already thanked this congregation once, but I'll thank you again. I just heard that you all have taken on McClure Elementary, which is a school that we've long had some of those significant challenges with. And the question is, well, why is that? Well, there's a number of things, but the reality is, in Tulsa and a lot of places across the country, the unfortunate reality is your parents' income and your zip code largely dictate your outcomes as a kid. And we dig into that and we think about what's our accountability as a city. There's a lot of things that we should be holding ourselves accountable for, but one thing that sticks with me every day as I think about the interconnectedness between all these things that we're working on. That is, in the last 3 years, 4,400 kids at Tulsa Public Schools alone have been in families facing eviction. Those kids are 50% chronically absent after the first month and 70% after the first year. Do you know how hard it is to learn how to read if you don't go to school? It's pretty hard. It's pretty hard. And so what we understand is that this goal that we have around affordable housing is also a goal that we have around education, is us beginning to clear the pathway so kids can show up to school ready to learn, and to make sure that we're helping reduce those chronic absentee numbers just by doing our job better. I don't think my job as mayor is certainly to teach kids how to read, and that's probably a good thing. My kid knows how to read because he has an awesome mother. But my job is to make sure that everything that might impact that kid's ability to show up to school ready to go, that we do a better job there, right? And so that's the reason, that's how we think about that, right? So if we see these holes where kids aren't ready for school, or we got kids that are not graduating from high school, we're trying to figure out what is our community response? How does the city, how do church communities, how do businesses get involved in taking care of these issues that are impacting kids on their pathway to success? And our goal is to get 15,000 more of them, improving those outcomes along that pipeline. What have we done to this point in those areas? So the one thing I knew when I got elected is that you can create accountability with numbers, right? But you got to make sure there's direct accountability in the mayor's office. So when it came to homelessness, it's a focus of ours. So there's a senior advisor for homelessness who wakes up every day. That is Emily Hall's job every day of the week. She's doing an amazing job at it, and I'll share a little bit about what she's working on. On the issue of housing, a senior advisor in housing, his name is Gene Bullmash. Gene was recruited here from Washington, D.C. He did affordable housing stuff in D.C. Turns out he had a few family ties here that Gene doesn't talk about. I got lucky on this one. So Gene's wife is a lady by the name of Emily Kaiser. That worked out for me a little bit. And so Gene has been doing this affordable housing stuff in D.C., and Emily's moving back home to Tulsa. And I was in a meeting one day with somebody and said, oh, Gene Bullmash, he does affordable housing stuff in D.C. And I'm like, I have no clue who Gene Bullmash is. And like, well, he's Emily Kaiser's husband. So there's literally an email that was sent sometime after I was elected, but before I took office. And it's emailed to Emily Kaiser. And the subject line is, your husband. And that's the story of me and Gene. And I got to meet him, and he's doing a fantastic job. I'll share a little bit about that in a second. And then when it comes to education, you may have seen just recently, we created the Office of Children, Youth, and Families at the city. So we're very excited about that. I brought on Impact Tulsa, an organization that I co-founded years ago, but hadn't been around for long. So they got a lot better since they were founded. You're an old VOTEC guy, I'm an old Impact Tulsa guy. So they hadn't changed the name yet, Roy, but they changed the logo quite a bit. So things have gotten better, but they are really our organization here that serves as a kind of a backbone where they're building partnerships with reading partners, with city here, all thinking about how do we get better outcomes for kids. So they're staffing the Office of Children, Youth, and Families. Now, you may have seen on the news that I got myself, I showed up at a traffic stop one day that maybe I shouldn't have, but and I know when you're reading it, you're like, oh, he must be he looks like he knew what he was doing there. He's a law enforcement guy. I'm not. My dad was, I'm not. But Laurel Roberts was a law enforcement person. And so what I want to do is make sure as we think about making Tulsa a safe city that I bring that experience into the mayor's office, right? Direct accountability to the citizens in the mayor's office. And so we created the position of Commissioner of Public Safety to do just that. So Laurel has police, fire, municipal courts, now animal services, because we recognize that public safety is something you have to think about, not just with law enforcement, not just with fire, but bring that experience to the mayor's office. And so Commissioner Roberts is there. And the important point about making this the safest big city in the country, a lot of people thought that was just like a political line. I talked about how I'm very specific about data points. There's actually a list of the safest big cities, and that list judges you based on property crimes, violent crimes, drug addiction, and traffic fatalities. And so even with that, although it sounds like a line, it actually represents an important data point that we're focused on as a city. I made this promise to get out of the courtroom as related to our tribal nations, and so Amanda Swope is the first Director of Tribal Policy and Partnerships, and I'm happy to report in just the short time we've been in office, we're really, really close to a settlement with the Creek Nation that would allow for us to address these jurisdictional issues and make sure that folks who commit crimes here, whatever they may be, if they're municipal offenses, that they will be very swiftly prosecuted in the tribal court that is responsible based on where they did it. And we're going to get ourselves out of the courtroom. We're going to make sure we're moving on, and everybody else can figure out the court battle issues. I recognize that part of being Tulsa's mayor is making sure that we respect all that is our city. And Mayor Bynum, my predecessor, if you look at our letterhead now, there's 1836 and 1898. 1898 is the year we became an incorporated city. 1836 is the year the Creek people who were removed from the southeast United States arrived at the Council Oak Trail on the banks of the Arkansas River. And so I recognize every day when I sign a piece of paper that I also am somewhat accountable to the fact that you have to honor and respect that part of our city's history, because it actually is part of our city's present. And that's the reason why we do that. And I'm very excited not just to talk about the public safety issues as it relates to tribes, but all the great opportunity that exists. And I'm really excited. I'm being really excited. You'll see some of that coming in the newspaper here pretty soon. But recognizing my job is different than maybe the governor's job in a broader political battle, or my job is different than maybe some other folks' job in a broader political battle. We're here to bring the temperature down as it relates to political hostilities and drive us all up in the way we're partnering to improve this city. That's what we wake up to try to do every single day in the mayor's office. So on the issue of homelessness, you may or may not have seen, I got into a little bit of trouble, man. Look, the one thing I've not really figured out is I got to be careful with how people feel about the national political environment. Because, when I started signing executive orders, people were like, oh, he's doing just like somebody else signing executive orders. And I was like, these are a little bit different. They're maybe not carrying the same force that some of these other are. But we really wanted to start to reorganize the city in ways that are going to help us get better outcomes, right? So on the issue of homelessness, we really have an agenda that's focused on some really key priorities. When I got elected, I brought some folks in. I said, okay, I believe I know how to get to functional zero homelessness. You know me with all my experience in homelessness services, right? And I said, but I want you all to really help me, because all I care about, thank you so much. Do I sound that bad? I said, all I really care about is the outcome. And I recognize you got to bring a lot of other folks in and bring them along to get there. I promise citizens that we get to functional zero by 2030. If that looks different than the things I very specifically campaigned on, I want to know that right now, right? That's what I want to know. Our plans are based on data and everything, but there's a lot of things going on the ground that I may not know. The first thing he told me was like, oh, well, we could do this, we could do that. I was like, stop. I don't know what we could do or what we might do. I want to know, what does it take to get there? How much money does it take to get there to start? And they told me, well, Mr. Almost Mayor, I wasn't quite mayor yet, Mr. Almost Mayor, Mr. that has no power. I said, from a dollars and cents standpoint, for every 450 folks on the street, it costs about $8 million. About $8 million. And I was like, okay, that seems like a lot. And they said, well, if you think about it, that is, I asked them to almost put together like a bundle, right? And they said, that's for everybody for whatever they might need. Some people need a high degree of services. They need supportive housing. They need substance abuse treatment. They need mental health treatment, that kind of stuff. So that accounts for that. But it also accounts for the person who just had a financial problem, and we can solve that problem to get them into housing, right? That also accounts for vouchers that we might need. So it was more of a, not just a shelter space situation, but it's like, this is how you move people into better outcomes. And I was like, all right, I'm very interested in that, so let's talk about what that plan looks like. And so that's what we've been focused on. So when I signed the executive order, it really started to organize the city to do a couple things, and I'm going to couple that with the housing executive order just to give you a sense of how these things, they're not the same issue. I always say they at minimum are cousins, right? They're minimum cousins. So the first thing that we did is we said we really have to get serious about decommissioning encampments. We got to find ways that we can very much in a compassionate way get people off the streets into housing and support them. But that means we got to understand who these people are and how we can get them to what they need. But I think no matter how you come at this issue, and I've told people I don't care just about the aesthetics of what it looks like around the city. What I care about is the fact that people should not be sleeping outside, and the public safety challenge that causes for the people sleeping outdoors and the folks who might interact with them. Not that folks are just inherently dangerous, but look, if I don't eat at least a sandwich in 3 or 4 days, and I don't have anything to drink, and I look at you and I think you might have something to help me get a sandwich or something like that, I'm just going to tell you, God is still working on me. I might aggressively ask you for a little bit of help. So for us, it's like, okay, so we have this encampment decommissioning team that we're putting together with the city. So every city department, along with our partners at Housing Solutions, the Day Center, we're all starting to think about what resources do we have if we were going to go approach an encampment. And what we have to do right now, because we don't have the infrastructures, we have to say, hey, Day Center, how many beds do you have? Hey, Salvation Army, how many beds do you have right now? So on and so forth. So we know that we have an encampment that's 10 people, for example. If those 10 people are men, but we only have 10 spots for women, then we're not going to go even worry about decommissioning that particular encampment because I don't have anywhere to put anybody, right? And so the idea is that we understand the needs of the people who are out there, and unless it's a matter of health and safety, we're not bothering them right now just because we don't have a better alternative. And we recognize that if you go stir up kind of a bee's nest, what happens? They all go somewhere else. And they can, you can definitely get stung too. She's like, you get stung. Yeah, that's right. That's also true. But the idea is we don't want to have a policy of just shifting a problem from different places, right? We've started that analysis with just how many encampments do we have in Tulsa? We're not even all the way through it, and the number's already north of 400. So we got our work cut out for us, but that's why we're starting with decommissioning. The next two things all are around shelter capacity. Right now, we're working really hard to get a low barrier shelter done so we can make sure that people, no matter what they come in with, there's a place for them to go so we can begin to serve them well. And then a winter shelter. What is crazy is every year, what do we know about Tulsa? It gets pretty cold. And sometimes it gets, we have 1 week where it's -11 and then it's 77, right? Like it's just part of the deal. But we know that happens every year. So in 2025, one of the things that'll be different about 2025 than was true about 2024 is that there will be a winter weather shelter that will open in November, and it will be open until March. Just as a county, hopefully it's unseasonably warm this winter, but this year we had 2 significant winter weather events that caused us to scramble to find a place for 1,400 people. 1,400 people needed somewhere to stay. It was not safe for them to be out there. We even had law enforcement going out, trying to make sure people knew they can come back. We kind of delivered people back to where they started, but when it's -11, if you stay outside for any amount of time, you're going to die. And so we were really trying to make sure we were protecting life. So it gave us a sense of just how many people are sleeping on the streets. And so that number is in and around 1,400, which doesn't even account for the folks who were already in a shelter somewhere. So this is 1,400 additional people. So after you get past some of the more traditional shelters, that's what the universe of people was. And so instead of us scrambling in 2025 and every year thereafter, winter weather shelter opens in November. It'll go until March. And so that way, those of us who might want to volunteer or help support and all that kind of stuff, we don't have to ask where do we have to go and why. We're planning for those things, and then the kind of the last part where the housing and homelessness intersect is it's getting really aggressive on the affordable housing front. So if anybody here is in affordable housing development space, or maybe even in just the housing development space, just development space, I spent the lion's share of the campaign talking about permitting. And permitting. And so we've already started the housing acceleration team. So we've put zoning and development services together so we can really accelerate projects as they come through. We've created a community builder program for folks who are looking to rehab these homes that are in communities that are blighted properties, so we can help support them through the process a lot quicker. Excuse me. And then we're also taking my predecessor, Mayor Bynum, was great to lead the Improve Our Tulsa work that put $75 million into housing. And so we get to implement that now. And we started with sending out a request for information to see what developers needed, right? Do you need infrastructure? Do you need resources for acquisition? Do you need resources for rehabbing? Do you need grants to provide, low interest, no interest loans to people trying to get into housing? So that way we understand how we can begin to spend the $75 million that's actually going to have an impact. We want to be really clear that we know we have some resources, but if we don't spend it in smart ways, it's almost as if you don't have any resources, and the only way to understand that is to get that information back from those who are in the business. And so that was the last part of that housing deal. So if you think about our homelessness strategy right now, it is focused on certainly making sure that we can address the issues of encampments and get people into shelters. But the goal is, over the next 3 years, we'll have a huge need for shelter capacity. In year 4, that drops off significantly because we got folks in transitional and permanent housing. It takes some time to get housing stock up. But our goal is not that it costs $8 million every year for forever. It actually means it's going to cost that much for about 3 years every year, and there should be a significant reduction. Our goal, as I said before, is not to just get people in shelters. It's to get people in housing, to get their outcomes where they need to be, to get them jobs, and to help them lead a better life. I went out and spent some time with some folks who are living on the street, and the stories are all different, right? There's a lady who was a teacher. She was living at Tradewinds, actually. There's a grant for her to live at Tradewinds, which is just that way, and just down the street. And I talked to her. She told me she once was a teacher. She had gotten herself in a bad relationship. That bad relationship, helped accelerate her losing her teaching contract. Losing the teaching contract meant she couldn't pay her rent. That relationship fell apart. She found herself homeless. She was on the street for 3 years. She asked me one day when I was talking to her, why did I think that women who are homeless wear so many clothes in the summer when it's hot? And what she told me continues to floor me to this day. And she said, it's because nobody wants to work that hard to rape me. And I just couldn't believe it. I was floored by that. And I was like, man, this is a whole different world. So for folks who say some people just want to be homeless, I think maybe in San Diego, where you don't have any threats to your safety, but not in Tulsa where the weather's like it is and you have to worry about every day is somebody going to victimize you. And she was on the housing wait list for 3 years, so this is somebody who was working hard to get back in housing. She did tell me she had developed a drug addiction she was working through, in part to stay awake, so people don't steal her stuff, so people don't victimize her, all these kind of things. And so I say that to say that when I spent time with those folks, it changes your perspective. It also changes your resolve to solve an issue that's hard to solve. I am under no illusion that homelessness is an easy issue to take on. But those of us in the mayor's office and all across the city of Tulsa, we are staking our success and failure as an administration on our ability to get the job done, and that's why we work so hard on it every day. And I'm going to be happy to report some really cool things soon that I can't talk about right now, because if I do, it might drive up the price of some property that we're trying to buy. So I'm going to get in trouble for doing it. I'll get in trouble for doing it. But there's a lot of exciting things that are happening, and it's really a sign of people in this community really coming together. When I talk about those 6,000 affordable units, or I talk about reaching functional zero homelessness, or I talk about the 15,000 kids who are making the same, all the things I talk about, I don't think of them just as the priorities of an individual, as mayor, or an institution as the city. Those are all of our priorities as a community. And I think when we all come together to address them head on, we're going to be in a much better position than we would if it were only one of us. I will say it's actually also really good to follow somebody in office who is a friend. So Mayor Bynum was very kind to me as we were transitioning in. I don't think he undersold how tough the job was. I will say that. So one day I may have to get him back for that deal. Maybe I won't pick up his trash or something. But he was very gracious, right, in how we think about these issues, and I think some of them, I always tell them, man, I hope every natural disaster that you have to deal with, I hope we're through all of those, because poor Mayor Bynum had to deal with floods, whatever that Father's Day storm was. I don't even know what that was. All kind of things, and I hope we're through them. But what I wanted to say about him. As a leader, as I was transitioning not transitioning into death, thank you. The job is not that bad. But as I was transitioning into the mayor's office, the one thing that was really cool is he gave me an office on the 3rd floor, and he gave me access to any department head I need to talk to in the interim, which I guess is probably weird for the department heads. It's like, I got my boss, and I got this guy downstairs who thinks he's my boss. But what was great about it is we got to talk about how do we begin to address these issues very aggressively come December the 2nd. And what I think was good about those conversations is it wasn't the first time anybody's ever thought about those at City Hall. It wasn't the first time that there was a focus on these things. But we really think that it's our time to lean into them. I don't get enough opportunities often to brag about all the great things that are going on, because we're always talking about how we're solving problems. But when I look at this community, there is so much greatness that is happening, and I take a lot of pride in it. I will tell you, this last month was the highest number of economic development interests we had in the city in a couple of years. Somebody said it's the change in administration. I was like, do you mean the White House or the mayor's office? And so I tease Mayor Bynum about that all the time. And the other cool thing was, you got to tell them, so we were driving, I was driving with the security detail one day, and there was this old, Keith knows about it, there's the car they used to drive Mayor Bynum around in. It had a chip on the hood. It was an older Ford Explorer, had a chip on the hood. And I mentioned to Chief Larson, just joking. And so I got a new Ford Explorer. And so one day we're leaving an event, and we pull next to Mayor Bynum. And I roll down the window. I'm trying to get his attention. He rolls down the window. He doesn't say hi first. He said, "They got you a new car?" That was the first thing he said to me. It was a lot of fun. But the big thing there is that this community, there's so many things that are going on that are going in the right direction, and I recognize those things didn't happen on December the 2nd, and I very much see my time in office and the things we're working on is taking the baton and trying to run our leg of the race really, really well, and I'm excited to run that leg of the race with everybody in this room. I'm looking over here to make sure I still have time. The thing, and I'm going to save time for some questions, which I think I'm about at my mark, almost at the questions mark, and I'll just say this. And I look forward to the questions. Just recently was at an event, and I read Thomas Merton's Prayer of Abandonment. And I gotta say, if you're mayor, not a more appropriate prayer, right? But in that prayer, he talks about feeling lost and asking for God's guidance. And he has this part of his prayer. He says that, his desire is to please, but he doesn't know if he's pleasing God, but he hopes that his desire to please in and of itself is pleasing, right? And so I'll say this to all the citizens across the city of Tulsa. We do have a North Star where we're trying to get. Every decision probably won't be one that people are super excited about. The signs of success won't always be immediately apparent, but every day we wake up to press toward that star that is those better outcomes for this community. And I hope in the interim that our desire to do these things well in and of itself is pleasing to all of you as citizens, because I can guarantee you have some of the hardest working people in the city who are working every day to protect streets, to make sure the water that you drink is clean, and yes, to make sure that we get on the other side of homelessness, housing, and certainly shore up relationships with everybody in this community, no matter who they are. And so I'm just really grateful for all of you for what you do, and I'm also very grateful for being invited in this Sunday morning. So with that, I'll take any questions that you have. Only easy ones.
Hang on one second.
Any idea as to when the interchange at I-45 75 will be complete?
I don't know about it complete. I was in the legislature for 8 years, and what I can tell you is it's going to probably be behind schedule. But what I can also tell you, it's going to be beautiful when done. And I know, Dana, where's Dana? Oh, Dana, when are we going for I know technically we've already started work. What's that? The 28th? Is that? Yeah, so the 28th will officially break ground on the Stonehenge South project that we have over there. I'll get a timeline for you. It's ODOT. It's not us. You know, if it were the city, we'd have it done in a weekend. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, is your office responsible for the street system?
Yes, sir.
That's the first question. Thank you.
Sure.
The second question is, are you aware of the way in which Harvard, Lewis, and Yale have been built and rebuilt?
Sure.
This morning.
I drove by a little bit earlier.
It's unbelievable. Who is running the show?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
You can't get it more backward than to pour the concrete and then come in and cut it up to put the sewer in.
yeah. So one of the things that we're really working on, yes, sir, it's been a frustration of mine for a long time, and I'll say a frustration of Mayor Bynum's for a long time. And sometimes we tear up a street, and everybody who has interest in what's under the ground didn't speak up when we tore it up. So sometimes it is us, sometimes it's an easement that includes PSO, Cox, or someone else. And so what we actually are doing now, let's see, right before I got elected, we kind of formed this kind of blue ribbon panel that included folks from ODOT, the city, utilities, to say like, hey, how are we going to do road construction projects a little bit better, including everything from how do we elevate when there's a issue between us. And so what I've started to tell people is that if you have an interest in a stretch of road, you need to let us know when we tear it up the first time, because if you don't get it done then, there might be a problem. Now, there's going to be times where that's not always going to be the case. Sometimes if we have new businesses that roll in, or we have a part of the community that's going to be developed a little bit more, sometimes the infrastructure under the ground is not going to support it as well as we would hope. So I can't tell you that for every stretch of road, but I can tell you what oftentimes happens is sometimes it is us pulling it back up. Sometimes it's actually somebody else who has an interest in that easement where they have to address something underneath the surface that they did not tell us about when we tore it up the first time. So it's a coordination issue oftentimes. So, you know, when you think about it, we're not always on the same schedule when AT&T or PSO or everybody else wants to do their infrastructure stuff. What we're doing right now is making sure we all do get on the same page. So we're trying to match our street programs up with infrastructure from private business who actually have an interest in things under the ground as well. Yes, sir.
What do you know about the threat from the state to close down mental health services?
Yeah.
So it's very confusing.
Yeah. So, yes, sir. So actually when I leave here, I'm going to meet with Adam, who is actually the CEO Executive Director at Family and Children Services. The only reason I'm not going to be at service today is I'm going to go talk to Adam. So this is what's happening right now. There's kind of a twofer going on. You want the political side of it, or you want kind of which one do you want first? So in Tulsa, there are 3 organizations that are CCBH organizations: Family and Children Services, Grant Mental Health, and Creoaks. The state's argument is that because we have all those, and I think they may be even the 3 largest in the state, there's a duplication of services. And so that means that Creoaks and Grand should not be doing work in Tulsa because Family and Children Services should be the only CCBH there. All of the state did authorize those other 2 to be here, for the record. So they didn't just come unwelcome, the state said they were, which actually caused a little bit of issue in the beginning. So what Grand has done is that they found a real niche in substance abuse treatment. You know, they're over there where 12 and 12 used to be and all that kind of stuff. So they actually are providing some services that Family and Children Services doesn't necessarily do at the same kind of scale. And we've kind of figured out, or started to figure out how all these organizations work together, because as you know, there's plenty of work to go around. But the state says that Grand, Family and Children's Services, and CREOX all do the same thing. Well, they say that, and that's almost as though saying that you and I are both humans, and we both do the same thing, so one of us can just go ahead and go. I have no idea what you do for a living, but I will say that you do something very valuable in this community, and we do not want you to go anywhere. That's the same way I feel about these CCBH organizations. Now, the other thing that's going on the political side, that's kind of what they would say to you. On the political side, there is, and this goes from my time in the legislature, I've asked a few people about this. So the Department of Mental Health is going to ask for a supplemental this year because of some issues that they had financially in the past. And the governor asked them not to ask for a supplemental because they're trying to make ways for tax cuts this year and trying to figure out where they can find money for it. And a $60 million supplemental is probably not a good way for you to create room for that. So there's this political battle right now that's going on around the state's finances and a tax cut, and this was one of the ways in which they found they could probably cut some resources by saying they were some duplication of services. Now, I'll also say, is there duplication? Probably in some ways, right? They all do mental health work, but they all do it in very different ways. And what if there is somebody out there who maybe has a family behavioral issue that Family and Children's Services is expert in, and they also have a substance abuse issue, which Grand is expert in. They might be serving the same family in similar ways, but they're not serving those people in the same way. And I think that's what we're up against. The bigger, broader issue for us is that we're talking tens of millions of dollars for the state, but all these folks are also served by, oftentimes with Medicaid dollars. And so you're looking at $100 million that's leaving this community in mental health services at a time that we can ill afford it. It's going to be nearly impossible for us to meet that goal of ending homelessness if we don't have those mental health supportive services in this community. I have a good friend of our family, and I always tell this story a little slow so I don't say any names or anything like that. But she's a young lady who Gavin has gone to school with since he was in kindergarten. They went to Elliott Elementary together. They went to different middle schools, but still been friends of the family, and they're all in high school now. Gavin's a junior in high school. Played with Robert on the Bishop Kelly football team. But he has this friend that we've known forever, and her family has resources, but she had one of those mental health episodes, and they took her to Laureate, and Laureate said she needed to be inpatient. But guess what? No beds. Call Arkansas, no beds. Call Dallas, no beds. They sent her home with instructions. And so you can't tell me we have duplication of services where even the people who can afford services can't get them. And so as I think about those issues facing young people, the unhoused community, and all of us who have family members who are perfectly stable but rely on services, we have plenty of need in this community, and I'm really concerned that we're going to lose out on some of those services, and I'm actually not sure the pathway forward. Now, what I will say is there's a number of us right now that are focused very much on making sure that those services are restored. I'll tell you guys something we're going to talk about tomorrow in a press conference. I'm assuming this isn't on Channel 8 or anything like that, but yeah, it won't be by tomorrow. Good, that's good to know. Please give me until tomorrow about 1:45 before you put this out in the public domain. About 10 weeks ago maybe, we were able to begin to implement something that actually was an idea started in my predecessor's administration, so I do give Mayor Bynum some credit on this, but we got to implement it. Now if you call 911, hopefully nobody's had to recently, but if you call 911, they'll ask you police, fire, or medical, which has been the three that they've always asked, but there's a fourth option now. They'll ask you about mental health. And in just the last 10 weeks, there's been nearly 1,000 people who have been diverted from a law enforcement interaction that have now been able to see a mental health professional to support them on their way toward a better life. These are the kind of things these dollars pay for. And if we lose out on that, we also lose the ability to do those kind of things, right? And we think about not only the cost savings to us as taxpayers, but we also think about somebody not sitting in a jail cell who actually just needs to be helped. So your question straight on, we're working on it, but the issue has been the CCBHs, and I think that's been an easy, very convenient excuse to not have to invest where we need to invest. But we're certainly working on it, concerned at the city because of the overall impact, certainly on the homelessness work, but also on our public safety work, but also just making sure that people in this community know there's a place to go should they need it. I don't control the mic, that's him. I don't know what to do. Yeah, hey, I'm in the business of people not being mad at me, so you need to be mad at him.
I got a microphone, do I have to do this? Okay. I would like to know, is the Safe City plan still on books? Are you familiar with the Safe City plan?
I'm not.
Oh dear. Well, this was an idea that was brought about maybe a year and a half ago or two, and they were deciding going to do that in Tulsa. And at the time, I remember the Jinx mayor was at this meeting, and this was a South Tulsa Republican group that I attend. The idea was that you would carve out, and it was supposed to be near the Utica area, and you would carve out that area, and the idea would be a large circle, and you would walk or ride a bicycle to work. And that was the idea, so that people would be in better shape. They would not have all the bad fumes from the cars. Yeah. But you're not familiar with that.
I'm not. One of the things that we have done, though, we have a sustainability task force that we are sitting to advise us on how we make Tulsa a sustainable city. One thing, again, this is one of those areas where it's not an area of expertise for me, but I do recognize that we have a long way to go, both in what our fleet looks like at the city, but also how this is a city that people can, walk around, have less reliance on vehicles, those types of things. I'm actually not familiar with this. Nobody's really come and talked to me about the Safe Cities program, but from a sustainability front, we do have a task force that come in and advise us how do we build infrastructure to the city to build some accountability around how we're thinking about sustainability and emissions and all that kind of stuff. Because I'm a big believer in we got to find things that we can implement. There has to be an infrastructure in the city that sits there for it, and that task force is going to advise us on how we do that. But I'm not familiar with it. Would love to learn more about it, though. Absolutely.
I often hear from friends about, and just people about, the number of positions on the south side of Tulsa that are available that are open for employment. And at one point in living in Tulsa, I was given a bus schedule and told to try to get downtown.
Oh, yeah.
Bus schedule and back, and it took me almost half a day to get downtown.
Yep. That's right.
What are you doing about that, or are you thinking about transportation so a person doesn't have to get up at 4 or 5 in the morning and try to get a bus out here to the south side for a low-paying job?
Yep. Yeah, that's a great question. We're working right now, we've talked to MTTA about making sure that our bus schedule can pass what I call the ice cream test. Can you get from the grocery store home before your ice cream melts? And you can't do that right now. And so what they are doing, and I even asked, like I always do, how much does it cost to make sure it doesn't take you more than 30 minutes to get anywhere in the city? And what I was told is about double the investment that the city gives right now. And the hard thing about this, kind of the underlying thing that's difficult for all these things now, is we don't know to what degree we can count on federal match dollars for the things that we're doing. And so what I don't want to do is overpromise, but what I will tell you is that to get to that point, just on, with what we have right now from an infrastructure standpoint, it costs the city about another $10 million put into public transit to be able to get there on the 30-minute front. What Metrolink is doing, though, is that they are trying to get a better sense of what the kind of flows are as far as people who are relying on bus service. Where do we see ridership up? The problem that I have with that oftentimes, though, is that ridership is showing where rides are available. So there's some people who've just decided that it's not a great way to get about the city, so we don't have a real true estimate on what it takes. And so we have costed it out. So like, if we're just thinking dollars and cents, that's the way forward. Obviously the dollars and cents part of that can't just be the only solution. And so we have done things where we've tried to do the bus rapid transit routes around places where we may have like housing units and connecting those to places where we have kind of business centers. So how quickly can you get from one of those to downtown, for example, which might be different from how can you get from your neighborhood to downtown. How do you get from there to Cherokee Industrial Park, those types of things. And that's been the solution for a long time. But that's still not getting us to a place where, for example, this also shows up, certainly shows up from an economic development standpoint, this also shows up in education. What we've learned is one of the chronic absentee issues is that a mother or a father who has to take one kid, if you got 3 kids who are in school, but one kid has to go see a doctor, there's not a guarantee that the trip to the doctor and back is going to get you home by the time the other kids get out of school. So guess what? Nobody goes to school. Nobody goes to school. And they don't go to school because, again, we have this public transportation issue. On the list of issues, I can tell you right now, it ain't at the top of the stack, but not because it's not important. It's not at the top of the stack only because, like, we're working backwards from some of these others, but we have begun to dig in on, like, what does it take for us to get there, and so on the investment side. So the next question is, if I don't have $10 million, how do we begin to improve the system? And you know, really cities in this part of the country, our biggest problem is the sprawl. We are so spread out. Trying to get people from place to place becomes very difficult. What I would like to see us do eventually is to go to more of a regional type of a model, not just because we need additional money, but because we are still the economic center of this community. And so figuring out ways in which, you know, we can have a service that serves a broader number of folks, but also that means we have additional folks who are paying, I think is going to be one way that we could get there. But the sprawl is what's killing us right now, and that's really difficult to contend with, especially when we're somewhat resource constrained, but also because we're so car dominant. So some of this is getting people who currently drive all the time to say, hey, might you think about using public transportation? Because we also, just from a culture standpoint, are so car dominant that it does then make it difficult to build up a public system, because part of it is how many rides do we sell, right? And we just don't have enough people who are utilizing it. The flip side of it is the people who do utilize it really need it, right? And so it's something we're certainly working on, but we're not where I would like for us to be quite yet.
I forgot I was up next. So our church is very involved in supporting McClure Elementary right here at 61st and
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that.
And we know that's an impoverished area.
Yes, ma'am.
We're also very involved in supporting the 74127 Forgotten Zip Code in West Tulsa. And you talk about a lack of transportation. The poverty that we see right across the street from where I live looks like a fine Hilton compared to what you see in the 74127 zip code, where these families do not have transportation
100%.
To even buy fresh produce and groceries unless they go to Sand Springs. And how are they going to get there if they don't have that?
That's right.
So what are we doing to improve this forgotten zip code?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think so many of the things that we're doing right now intersects with it, right? Like, I hate to say, but I think this is part of it. The work that we're doing to, you know, put kids on a pathway to economic mobility is oftentimes a 2-generational thing. So what I'm going to find when I'm having this conversation about young people in these families, I'm going to find that mom and dad probably need some additional supports too, and our ability to support them is going to be really critically important to this work. I have said when I was beginning that from an economic development standpoint, I actually, and this probably goes to my career tech days, I believe that workforce development is a critical part of that, right? But I also know that the big challenge that we have with some of our workforce development programs is the entry and exit points don't make sense for people who are living in poverty. Folks don't have time to start in August for something that's not going to be done until the next May. They need those things now. And so we really are leaning into connecting folks with apprenticeships. The fact is that this is one of those challenges that we recognize. It's not a city-centric challenge, like we can't solve it on our own. But what is helpful to us at the city are folks who are partnering with schools, are partnering in communities to say, hey, city, we need some support. Can you support us? Just recently, we launched the Neighborhood Conditions Index. And so we took every neighborhood in the city and we basically ranked them from a priority 1 to a priority 3. So there's only, 3 potential priority areas you meet. Priority 1 is probably the neighborhood that you're talking about, right? All the things that probably aren't in the way that we would like them to be are exactly as we might guess. And so we're taking all of our city resources and we're starting to prioritize going into those neighborhoods where we can at least say we have no more priority 1s. And we started that neighborhood conditions index pilot just last month, if I'm not mistaken. And so we would love to partner with folks who have an interest in those neighborhoods, because we can't do every priority 1 neighborhood alone to start by ourselves. But what we could do is we could offer every resource in the city, working with organizations who care about those neighborhoods to begin to address those, just like we're doing in the neighborhoods where we have started. So Dana Walton, who is back there, she's my chief of staff. If you don't mind maybe getting Dana your information, I would love for us to reach back out and talk about how we can bring the resources of the city to bear to work in the same place this church is working in, because that is our desire, to work in communities with people who want to help, and then we can bring whatever we can to the table, even if it might not be one of those neighborhoods where we're starting on the neighborhood conditions index, but would love to do that if that's something that's the interest of the people in the room.
Hang on one second, guys.
Mayor, the bond issue passed quite some time ago. Can you give us an update status on the communication center at the State Farm Building?
Yes.
What the progress is there and when it will be completed?
Yep. So we, the police and fire still won't move in for 18 months or more, but we're pretty soon will be kind of starting to occupy the building, make sure the toilet's flushed and all that kind of stuff, make sure it's ready for that change. One new wrinkle that I found out when I became mayor, though, is that there's another 2 really important functions of that building downtown that there was no plan of what to do with them, and that was the municipal court and the municipal jail. And so we're working right now to get a spot for the municipal court and municipal jail, but it's going to be on schedule in accordance with the beginning to get the hotel built downtown. So we have about 18 months or so before we get people out, and construction of the hotel will start not too long thereafter. We've had a couple of challenges along the way. There's a lot of fiber under the building that the rest of the city runs on, as it turns out. And initially I was told it was going to take about $10 million to move that from downtown Tulsa out to the State Farm Building. We found ways in which we're going to mitigate that challenge. But we're generally on schedule for the move. The challenge that we have is making sure we have a spot for municipal court and municipal jail. Again, it's one of those things I can't talk about because I might drive up the cost of the property that we're hoping to get into.
Do you anticipate a change in the federal funding support coming to the city with the changes going on in Washington, D.C.?
We've already seen it. Just recently, we had a $43 million flood mitigation grant that we no longer have. And in fact, we were supposed to get reimbursed for, I think, 80 or 90% of what we already spent, and we've been told that might not be honored. I met with the executive director of the Housing Authority just last week, and if everything holds as it is trending to hold right now, we'll have to claw back about 900 Section 8 vouchers from folks who currently have them, so we won't be able to afford those based on those funding changes, and I think so on and so forth, right? So everything from a lot of our public infrastructure to some things supporting folks, we are really having to think about what might be the overall impact, but we're also spending a lot of time communicating with our federal delegation. I don't think it can be assumed that members of Congress and the administration, even in the same party, are on the same page on this stuff. So we're being really aggressive about communicating to Senator Langford and communicating to Tom Cole, who is the appropriations chair, communicating to Senator Mullen and Representative Hearn, like the impact of these things in the city, because they're not, there's some who might think that the only things that are going away are wasteful spending or diversity initiatives or whatever the case may be, which I think the diversity initiatives are just fine personally. But that's not the only thing that's going away. Our ability to protect this city from floods is also something that is going away. And if you're just looking at it on a piece of paper, any of us might say, oh yeah, we don't need that thing, it's really expensive. But that is, those are some of the things that we're seeing already.
May I ask the same question on state funding?
Well, the mental health funding issue, I think, is a great example of it, right? So we're starting to see that. I think there's this, it's this weird thing that happens sometimes, right? You get these political things that just catch on, and this conversation around Doge and all this kind of stuff, people are just looking for things to cut. And I was in the legislature for 8 years. I can tell you, there's not a lot of things that we can afford to cut. And I haven't run across a whole bunch of people asking for that tax cut to do it. And so I think there's this political push to do something that nobody's really asking for because it just kind of sounds good. And that's having a pretty dramatic impact. We already know mental health. I can now tell you about public infrastructure, on housing, and the list goes on and on right now.
Has anyone told you about all the ways that this church has been working for the homeless?
Yeah, well, we were just talking about it a second ago, and I was like, man, that list is so long. One of you guys should have been up here talking today. That's what I told them. I said, you guys have been in the business a lot longer than I have. But I will tell you, hearing that really warmed my heart. Because when I've talked about our ability to end homelessness in 6 years, it has never been because, I'm the smartest person in the world, or we got amazing people in the mayor's office. We do have amazing people in the mayor's office. I'm definitely not the smartest person in the world. But it has been because I see all these signs across this community where people are investing in Eden Village, as you all have, investing with Habitat for Humanity, which you all have. The question I got in the back is, how are you helping families who are vulnerable from an economic standpoint? The priorities of this church are the priorities of the city, and I only have faith that we're going to be able to make it good on these priorities of the city because of people like the folks in this room have been so invested in it for such a long time. And so I, again, say thank you all for what you all are doing in that front.
Last question.
Yes, ma'am.
How are you as a person adjusting to being mayor versus working in the Capitol for 8 years as a legislator? And is it better, more stressful?
It's way better.
It's way better?
It's way better. It's way better. I was a Democrat in the Oklahoma Legislature, so this is way better than that. But yeah. The other big thing that I'm really I love. So when I got elected into the legislature, Gavin was an 8-year-old third grader, and so I would drive back and forth. I got used to driving back and forth every day because we had school stuff, baseball, that kind of stuff. So I never had gotten an apartment in Oklahoma City. I'd drive home every day, which actually, talk about a good mental health decision, actually driving back home every day. And career tech, you're driving all over the state all the time, so you get used to it. So I will say, going from a 90-minute commute to about a 4-minute commute is also something that's been pretty awesome. From a family standpoint, Gavin is now 16 and driving, and so he's been really excited that I'm a little busier than I used to be because he didn't get bothered as much. And people ask me all the time, what does Gavin think about it? I said, well, one of his good friends is Robert Bynum. They don't care about what their dads do. They just want to know if their dad's around, and if the answer is no, they're really happy about it. But it's been a good transition. I mean, the best part about this job, I think, is to come in rooms like this, to be around people who care about this community, and more importantly, care about people in this community that not everybody always cares about. And so, just a note of gratitude as mayor, but more importantly, as somebody who just lives in this city. If I was somebody living in that neighborhood, it would make me feel so grateful and warm my heart so much to know that there are people who I do not know who are going to ask the mayor on a Sunday morning about me. That's what makes Tulsa special, and that's why it's so awesome to be mayor of the city.
Mayor.